Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
A week or two back, I did a video about some nursing schools that got busted in Florida selling diplomas, and they got put out of business. And then the question that follows that, of course, is what about the people who bought their diplomas? Are they out there practicing nursing? And if so, should they be? Well, Rex sent me notes. Steve, time for a follow-up. States moved to crack down on nurses with bogus diplomas. So they are going to follow up on this. Michael Hill wrote this for the Associated Press. Medical licensing officials in several states are scrambling to stop nurses with fraudulent academic credentials from caring for patients after 3 Florida schools were accused of selling thousands of bogus diplomas. New York regulators told 903 nurses in recent weeks to either surrender their licenses or prove they were properly educated. Delaware and Washington officials have yanked dozens of nursing licenses. Texas has filed administrative charges against 23 more, and other states are expected to follow up as well. In some cases, lawyers for the nurses contend that states are questioning the credentials of caregivers who earned diplomas legitimately. But there's wide agreement in the industry that nurses with fraudulent degrees need to be rooted out. The president of the American Nurses Association Union said the public needs to know that when they're the most fragile, when they're sick, when they're in a hospital bed, that the individual who is at their bedside has gone through the required training. States are acting in the wake of Operation Nightingale, a federal investigation into what officials say was a wire fraud scheme in which several now closed Florida nursing schools sold phony diplomas and transcripts for about 6 or 7 years, ending in 2022. 25 defendants, including school owners and recruiters, have been charged, according to the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida. And those cases are still pending. About 7,600 students paid on average $15,000 for the bogus diplomas, according to prosecutors. Around 2,400 of those then passed a licensing exam. So some people say, well, Steve, if you just buy the diploma and pass the exam, aren't you qualified? Well, it depends on what the exam covers, but also there's 7,600 who paid and 2,400 who passed. So there's that. How did so many test takers pass without the required classroom and clinical work? In some cases, they were experienced LPNs seeking to become RNs, and some had been healthcare providers in other countries. The nurses got jobs across the country, including at a hospital in Georgia, Veterans Affairs medical centers in Maryland and New York, a skilled nursing facility in Ohio, and an assisted living facility in New Jersey, according to court filings. Students came not only from Florida, but also New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Texas, and Delaware. Many of the students took their licensing exam in New York, where they can sit multiple times, according to investigators. Investigators identified the Florida nursing schools as the Palm Beach School of Nursing, Siena College, a school in Broward County that was not related to the college of the same name in New York, and the Sacred Heart International Institute, which is also based in Broward County and had no relation to a university with a similar name in Connecticut. It was not entirely clear how many of the roughly 2,400 nurses with credentials are currently employed or where. Federal officials shared information so states could pursue nurses with phony academic credentials, and some states have taken action. I suspect others will too. The Washington State Nursing Care Quality Assurance Commission rescinded the licenses of 17 people and denied license applications for 4 more. The Delaware Board of Nursing annulled 26 licenses. Georgia Board asked 22 nurses to voluntarily surrender their licenses. The 23 nurses facing license revocations in Texas can continue working while their cases are pending. Texas Board of Nursing General Counsel said more charges could come as officials develop the necessary information for each individual. A spokesperson for Veterans Affairs said it removed 89 nurses from patient care nationwide immediately after being notified by federal officials. The agency has not found any instances of patients being harmed. And think about that. Your first step is to identify them and find them, the nurses. And then the second thing is to check their work. New York's Office of Professions posted on the State Education Department's website that it expects some of the 903 licensees who attended the schools did, in fact, attend required hours and clinicals and are properly licensed. Those people are being asked to have a qualified nursing program submit verifications. Attorneys for some of the nurses in New York and Georgia say nurses who legitimately earned diplomas are getting caught up in the investigation. There are obviously people who bought transcripts who are fraudulent, should not be practicing, But there are also people who went to these schools legitimately and did nothing wrong, says an attorney out of Atlanta. And they are somehow being lumped together with the fraudulent nurses. Well, it's going to be kind of hard right now if you got a degree from one of those schools to say, yeah, I actually went there and I did all the work. Because it makes you wonder, were they actually just selling diplomas to some people but making other people do the work? Williams said her clients are hardworking immigrants who went to schools that were accredited at the time and have since worked for many years without incident. Similarly, attorney Jordan Fensterman in New York said he has clients who attended classes at one of the schools to finish up their RN degrees and then worked during the pandemic. He said these nurses deserve due process. Of course they do. Everyone deserves due process. So if you are accused of this and you are innocent, then you defend yourself and explain it. The state board actions are taking place as hospitals across the nation try to deal with chronic staffing challenges. Hopefully the number is smaller once the authorities sort things out, said the American Nurses Association president. And so it's a mess. It's a mess. And part of the problem is the staffing shortages. And so right about now, if you show up someplace and you've got what appear to be good credentials, there's a very good chance that they're going to hire you much faster with a little less scrutiny than they would have done, say, 20 years ago. And that makes complete sense. But unfortunately, now we know that there's at least 3 schools where some of their paperwork is what we call suspect. So as you can imagine, if you went to the schools between those time periods, you're going to be asked to explain whether or not you legitimately earned the degree. And that might be a pain in the rear end, but you understand why they're doing it. If you said to me right now, Steve, there's a school out there selling diplomas, so it looks like people went to law school who didn't. Should they crack down? Yes, crack down on them. Because I know I did the work, I did it the hard way, and that's what you're supposed to do. And so it protects the profession and the whole organization when you go in and root out the people who don't belong there. And so I heard from many nurses when I did the first story who said that, knowing how hard it was for me to go through the schooling and do the classes and the tests and everything else I got to do at school and then pass everything necessary for the licensing, knowing how hard that was, it's an insult to me and my fellow nurses that there's people out there who did it somehow the easy way and cheated. And so, yeah, you've got to go after these people. Now, if there's innocent people swept up in this, I feel bad for them because obviously it'd be a pain in the rear end to go back and prove what you did a couple of years ago at school. But there'd be ways to do that. But you understand why they have to do that. So I am saluting the states that are following up on this. I had some skeptics in my audience who said, Steve, I wonder if they'll ever chase down any of these nurses or not. And some people said, I bet they won't. And I thought to myself, if they're scattered about the nation, all it takes is a couple states to start doing it, and the other states will have to do it because of peer pressure, if nothing else. So there you go. States move to crack down on nurses with bogus diplomas. Michael Hill wrote that for the Associated Press. Rex sent me. Thanks a lot. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Energy spent worrying is mostly wasted energy.